Josip, what is your outlook for the warehouse logistics market, and what role do you see Gideon playing in that market?
So warehouse logistics market is really just starting to tap into a transformative era. It started transforming a little bit by introducing different sorts of digitalization technologies, warehouse management systems, automation of certain processes, again, software wise. But majority of the opportunity there to really increase efficiency still is almost untouched. And the big next step, the big opportunity really lies in how we move goods, how we store goods. So in how we physically operate and change operations of those facilities. And really the solution is in automation. It becomes inevitably clear that automation is what solves this problem. And now the Gideon's role in this automation is optimization of loading bay. So loading and unloading processes are really one of the few core processes that participate in every supply chain operation in every warehouse. And automation of loading and unloading bay is one big problem. At the core, it's about loading and unloading, but also it's about integrating with the rest of the systems, the rest of automation that does exist in the warehouse, or just manual processes that do happen there. So they also somehow need to interact with loading and unloading solution.
What type of efficiency are your clients able to achieve when you put your automated system there? Because the loading bays, they can get clogged up at times if they're not optimized properly.
When we talk about efficiency, there's a number of factors there, right? But really, customers expect their operations compared to status quo to stay somewhere where they are today, right? And then if their status quo is really fully manual operation, then they expect that within a shift, they do not see decrease in that throughput. So at minimum, operationally speaking, the throughput needs to remain the same. What's easier? It's easier to scale automation. It's easier to add another robot to increase that throughput than today to add another person to do that work, because there's no labor, there's no people who really want to do this kind of work.
There's a growing labor shortage. There's rising minimum wage. We're at the point where businesses are being squeezed where they just can't afford to operate. We had the CPI report. Online retail sales continue to grow. They're going to continue to grow for as long as we're alive. Is that what's really driving this optimization? The online retail sales where consumers in the old days, you wait 2 days, 3 days, no problem, my good will get there. Now it's that, it's been 2 hours, my good's not here. What's wrong? Is the urgency driving this as well?
For sure, bottom line, urgency and decrease in the delivery times is certainly something that drives the need for increased efficiency. But the other perspective is also just the fact that there's no people who really want to do this kind of works. I have the number for UK, don't have specific number for the US market, but UK Yorkshire, one region, over 5 years of time frame, the average age of a forklift driver grew from 51 to 55 years of age. So within 5 years of a time, the average age grew for 4. Brexit did help there, but this change is just dramatic, right? So we can imagine what's going to happen in 10 years from now. On the US side, we see just many operations where turnover is over 100%. Those operations cannot sustain that kind of turnover rates. And then you can imagine what young people think about it. It's not about what's the wage. It's just what kind of work we want to do. People historically work to finance food, right? Today, people are not working because they're hungry. Most of the people work because they want the quality of life. They want completely different things. And then they choose, right? People today, younger generations choose much more what kind of work are they really going to pursue. And it's pretty rare that someone wants to become a forklift driver.
It's a global phenomenon. From 2008 to 2022, in Japan, forklift licenses are down 22%. There's a forklift shortage. Bank of America put out a really great report on it. It's a growing dilemma, epidemic, if you want to use that across the globe. The more we shop online, the more we want farm fresh foods, you need warehouses. You have to automate them. It seems that society is moving towards this automation because of demands and individuals not wanting to drive forklifts. Was there a moment in history that caused this, I don't want to be a forklift driver anymore? Or is it just a changing society of the way that individuals expect jobs to work? Or is it all the money the global government's been printing? What's causing this?
Yeah, it's certainly nuanced answer, but there's many drivers. If we just think about how people share their experiences today, we all look at Facebook. Some younger people, younger than two of us, spend time on TikTok. And I hate to say, but there's not many people sharing stories about driving forklifts. right? Even spending time inside warehouse environment. So it's really about the way of living and the way of working, and where do we want to really spend our time. Industrial settings, unfortunately, are not that environment.
It's sad. You can learn a lot. When I was younger, I spent a lot of time in industrial warehouses. I'm just curious to learn. A lot of individuals, family members, friends that worked in the produce industry, and you watch the unloading and loading of trucks. You learn stuff. And I was a kid driving the forklift. That was cool. And learned something about natural gas that made the thing zoom around there because you couldn't run gas in the warehouse. Now we have electric. It's really, really neat. Do you feel by introducing automation into the warehouse, as logistics become cool for that younger generation that likes robots, they're growing up in the metaverse, they're growing up with TikTok, automation, hey, perhaps that's an interesting job. I could become, as the Wall Street Journal phrased, a robot wrangler.
Yeah, robot wranglers all over makes a lot of sense. I'm sure automation will help there. So people, instead of talking about driving one forklift at a time, will talk about operating fleet of 20 or 30 units that are loading and unloading truck trailers. It's much better thing to have a fleet of my robots than you stand up on one or sit on one and drive and load and unload one pallet at a time. It's not very exciting. Definitely still there remains the challenge. These days I'm trying to convince my family how exciting that is to enter some logistics environment or factory in the middle of nowhere, because that's where logistics happens. It's hard sell, honestly. It's really hard sell. So there's still going to be this need and intention to optimize further. I believe there's going to be lack of interest from young people to still spend time there. However, automation is a big part of solution. And certainly it's going to be exciting, at least for some people, to see that impact, because that's where physical revolution really happens. Historically, we saw huge advancements in ICT, right? Communications optimized, efficiency increased dramatically. Now, when we think about how much data we exchange, it's a completely different thing than it was 10 years ago, right? Now, physical world is still in its infancy, right? Physical world still didn't gain that traction or that net effect that we see nowadays with data. So the next big thing that's going to happen with automation across supply chain will certainly help also attract young people and really help them see the purpose. Driving forklift, it's hard to sell the purpose. With operating large fleets and moving huge amount of goods, the purpose becomes more and more obvious.
The purpose becomes obvious, but it becomes a high-paying job without the back stress. Operating a forklift and moving stuff and working in a warehouse, it causes back stress. And then the healthcare goes up, and we can go down the line. So the automation is going to increase efficiency of the warehouses. It's going to lower the healthcare costs. Warehouses of the future are going to be fully automated at some point. I don't have a date. I'm not going to give a date, but at some point they're going to be fully automated. How do you see the warehouse automation market evolving over the next decade?
Warehouse automation is really in its infancy when it comes to automation. When we think about early adopters, who are really early adopters? 5 years ago, when we thought about early adopters, those were the companies that have started talking about automation and really deployed some robots in their operations. Nowadays, as industry, as community, robotics community, we start valuing our partners, customers in completely different way. We start recognizing not those who really did attract that marketing attention, but those that really managed to transform their operations and roll out automation across the network. And we are still in early adopters phase. Those are still companies that we're all well aware that have managed to do it. Majority of the market is still not there. Where is it going to evolve? We're going to see more and more of those companies that manage to roll out across the network and at the same time adapt, obviously, transform their operations, adapt new practices, teach new people, and raise many of those robot wranglers instead of people who are just driving forklifts or operating different types of machines.
When does a network effect kick in, where you have a series of warehouses controlled perhaps by one firm or a REIT or a Prologis, where all suddenly one gets automated, the next one gets automated, the next one gets automated? When does that network effect kick in?
That's a billion-dollar question. The network effect with robotics and with hardware takes definitely more time than some other things we've seen in the past. I like one guy, Jeremy Rifkin. He says that while ICT transformation really took us a couple decades, we're going to need much more time to truly see the adoption and change in that physical world at scale. So it's not going to be as quick. The network effect will still play an important role. It's just going to be slower and will take more time than what we used to when thinking about the changes in the past 10 or 20 years.
What could cause that to accelerate? It seems that you look at society, you look at history. There's always a defining moment in history where all suddenly we hit the gas pedal and things take off and accelerate. What's going to cause that acceleration moment for the autonomy of warehouses? Is it going to be just the growing labor shortage? Is it going to be the lack of jobs? And the company say, okay, we can't hire the labor. We don't automate. We're out of business. Does that become the turning point, or is it another major turning point?
I believe the key for that turning point is really in the hands of end users. Right now, we see that strategically, some of the largest companies, some of the largest corporations are really doubling down on automation. So once they're doubling down, then many other things come into place, right? Then we see venture firms supporting that. Then we see private equity firms also willing to put capital, finding their opportunities in the space. Then we see a lot of just the entire community pushing in the same direction. I believe we are close to that tipping point. Walmart doubled down on automation when it comes to their regional distribution centers and big part of distribution centers across their network. Some others, like on Canada side, Loblaw doubled down on automation. When it comes to largest distribution centers, they said we have to do it, or like our operations might not be sustainable anymore in a few years from now. So we talk about largest retailer in the US, largest retailer in Canada. We think further about like logistics companies. DHL, they have their accelerated digitalization program that's really advanced, right? That's rolling out already certain technologies at scale. So we see that early adopters have started that journey. And it's fun to say that early adopters are largest companies in the world, right? So it's not about some few small entities that have really high level of belief that this will be the future. But those are the companies that recognize this is about sustaining ability to deliver to our customers. If they said that, that's very good signal for everyone else in the industry.
FedEx is doubling down. I was recently at Fort Worth, hosted by Mr. Perot Jr. in Hillwood, and the CEO of FedEx was talking about doubling down on automation, the efficiencies that FedEx is unlocking. Steven Schwartzman and John Gray over Blackstone, one of the largest private equity funds in the world, they're talking about doubling down on automation. The interesting part with Blackstone, for listeners and viewers that don't know, they're also one of the largest commercial real estate owners of warehouses in the United States. They go back and forth with Prologis. Who's larger? I'm not sure. Todd, if your Prologis is larger, good. Blackstone, Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Gray, if you're larger, good. Either way, you're doing really good by ushering in automation. Josip, what economic benefits are your customers unleashing when they deploy your systems at their warehouses?
Companies are doubling down on automation for sure. Prologis has an incredible perspective as an operator of facilities across different industries. So they're really great address to talk about the future of automation. Specifically when it comes to unit economics across those operations for loading and unloading processes, this becomes really exciting. It's 1 to 3 years depending on facility profile. If facility has higher number of work hours per week, then we are closer to a year. If it has 2 shift operations, only 5 days a week, then it's closer to 2.5, 3 years. So unit economics is really structured in a way that it makes a lot of sense for users to automate. It makes good business opportunity for us as a vendor. It makes great business opportunity for customer to utilize, to deploy technology. We found what makes most sense for both sides, and that's how we approach the market right now.
Are you leasing the vehicles to your customer? Are you selling them with a software subscription? What does that model look like?
We really combine both models. It's sort of a hybrid model where we do sell chassis upfront, but then over time, the value is really extracted, right? And that's basically value sharing model that we have. So we do charge certain part recurring, but upfront, since it's really large investment into building vehicles, right? It does have hardware component. So we sort of share that upfront pressure between us and the customer.
What platform are you building the vehicle on? Are you taking a Zoox-like approach and building this from the ground up, or are you building on a pre-existing forklift platform?
We buy vehicles off the shelf, or in certain cases, when it's really very important to have something custom for a specific customer, then we also have that possibility. At the moment, our main vehicle is medium duty truck, which has 3,000 pounds, and that's based on an off the shelf unit. The other version, which is 5,000 pounds, more custom type of vehicle, is something we have as custom design. But really, that scale does come, scalability perspective and possibility does come on the shoulders of existing vehicles that are manufactured at volumes that are then taken from our side. We automate, retrofit them, and then ship them to the end customer.
You have a Gideon autonomy kit that you put on these vehicles to automate them. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, yes. So we take the base truck, automate that base truck by putting our retrofit kit, automation kit on top, which includes obviously rewiring of the system, deployment of safety system, because safety standards in manual business are not the same as automated business. So there are certain things that we have to do before this vehicle is really ready for QC and then ready for shipment to end customer.
What does your hardware stack look like? Are you using LiDAR, camera, radar? What does it look like?
That's a good question and very often asked by autonomy people, right? As a road to autonomy, it's always an awesome conversation to have. You know, if it's LiDAR, if it's camera, if it's combination, what it is. In our case, we believe it's really combination. Cameras do give us something very specific, capability that somehow emulates how we humans understand the world. On the other side, LiDARs have proven to be a good solution from safety perspective. And so how we put it, we really make sure the system is fully safe per standards, compliance based on LiDAR technologies, but cameras are the key element that give us ability to deliver and solve specific problems, such as trailer loading and unloading. So we say that performance layer really relies on camera, while safety layer relies on LiDAR. So we need both.
It's redundant. You're redundant today as you scale. We talked about Blackstone, FedEx, Prologis, the various other customers, DHL. They're going to look at economics and cost. How do you see the stack evolving as you scale? And do you see the stack getting more cost efficient as you scale?
So scaling in part does come with reduction in costs, right? We do see significant opportunities in optimization, in further optimization, in also evolution of other component businesses. Right now, robotics component business is not extremely advanced. So we see many vertically integrated companies, many companies that cover both like the software stack, sensors, and we ourselves build our own cameras because when we were starting in over years, we didn't manage to find suitable camera on the market. So we had to build literally our own camera to be able to solve problems that we wanted to solve. So this component business is growing. And I'm sure there is going to be new solutions, both for performance layer and for safety layer, that will allow us to reduce costs. So that's one important lever that we see that's going to be evolving further over time. Now, one important thing that's happening also is more focus from computing businesses, right? For example, NVIDIA has been doing huge push recently in our direction, in direction of industrial automation and autonomy. So these kind of initiatives definitely like great segue into more optimized future, more optimized COGS, and just easier scalability, right? Which will in the end impact also what the price for end user looks like, which will enable, again, better business cases and faster adoption from those companies that may not be today really early adopters.
When you look at a more optimized future for warehouses and trailer unloading, do you hit a density point where you can only have X amount of your autonomous forklifts operating, or can you have one per bay, or how do you see that going?
Density on the loading and unloading bay is enabled by our fleet management capabilities. What we see, essentially, there are two examples of use cases. In one example, we have some sort of storage area or staging zone, which is close to a trailer. In that case, it just doesn't make sense to have multiple vehicles operating inside the same trailer because the efficiency gain is very minimal while we utilize multiple vehicles. So in that case, it's really one unit that does the job. However, there are many cases, especially if we think about manufacturing operations, where the distance between trailer and some point of feed in or depletion is longer. So if it's 50 meters, 100 meters, then it might already make sense to have two or more units. And in that case, we can talk about dozens of vehicles. And for a large majority of loading bays, it's more than enough.
So you've got the loading bay taken care of. As we know, the warehouse is going to become fully automated. Will Gideon look to introduce new, more autonomous products into the warehouse space in the future?
Loading and unloading bay is really our starting point. We recognize, if you think about the whole supply chain, starting from factory over through large distribution centers to smaller distribution centers, loading and unloading really happens everywhere. In each of those pieces of supply chain, we have loading and unloading processes. Now, if we talk specifically about warehouse environment, even there, everything starts and ends with loading and unloading. It's sort of like separated process, or most separated process as much as it gets compared to some other things that happen in the heart of distribution center or a warehouse. So right now we recognize this being really good beginning point to get into that warehouse. However, already today we recognize that our core technology powers and enables multiple other use cases. And although as a company, when it comes to direct to customers, direct to market, we recognize that we can focus on one use case at a time, which is loading and unloading operation right now. On the other side, like this capacity or potential of our core technology that's much broader is something we want to also benefit from and want to help our customers benefit as well at the same time without necessarily us being directly exposed to them. And that's why we partnered with some of the largest vehicle OEMs, leading industrial vehicle manufacturers to help us go to market. Toyota is one recent example that was recently publicly released, who goes really to market based on Gideon core technology, but utilizing their service network, utilizing their sales capacity, support maintenance capacity. They are the partner that goes to market, helps customers optimize, automate, while we are delivering core technology.
Well, the vehicles that you're working on, Toyota, will those be factory grade vehicles or will those have retrofit kits on them?
So those are Toyota and OEMs in general. Of course, they want to utilize their manufacturing processes. So right now, I can't talk specifically about Toyota's manufacturing operations, but it's natural that each one of those large companies definitely want to make sure they are best in the world in manufacturing. They want to continue benefit on that knowledge, on that process that they do have today in operations. And it's certainly not the intention that Gideon takes over that and retrofits vehicles. So Toyotas of this world are definitely partners, companies that have that know-how and that can really deliver that full package to the market.
As you develop new autonomous products, how will you ensure they continue to fit into the workflow that your customers are accustomed to today?
One thing is about really fitting into existing workflow. The other thing is about understanding how we can help customer find better workflow that will bring them more value, more efficiency. Technology today is typically, our technology for sure is flexible enough to accommodate that workflow. So fundamental baseline is, yeah, here is the solution. You can deploy it easily, and then you can start really operating that in a couple of days. And then after that, customers start recognizing, oh, you know what? We thought it's the original workflow that we needed. Now, when we started using the technology, now we find there might be a better way to really optimize further. There is this gap that we need to close, and suddenly we get another benefit like 10-15% efficiency gain. These kind of opportunities, that's why pilots can serve well for, but only after fully deploying initial fleets and optimizing further based on that knowledge, the rollout opportunity opens up. And that's exactly the difference between those that started and that tried automation at marketing level, right? And those that really managed to scale across their network.
Efficiency is the name of the game. There's no denying that. You look at what Mr. Andy Jassy is doing at Amazon. It's efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. As he cut costs, they're increasing automation, but the bottom line is they're increasing efficiency, and it's rewarding shareholders the way Mr. Jassy's running Amazon. How should warehouse operators prepare for autonomy? It's coming. Do they have to do anything to their warehouses from an infrastructure standpoint? Do they have to update anything? How should they start preparing now?
Most of the companies we had the chance to speak with, they know exactly what they want to do as a next step, but only some of them think about 2 or 3 steps ahead. Robotics industry is really about thinking a couple of steps ahead. Productivity is what enables true impact on efficiency. Now, productivity has two sides. On one side, vendors really need productivity to understand, okay, who's going to be my partner for that rollout, for those few next steps. On the other side, customers, users, need to also recognize that opportunity and think few steps ahead. And then this kind of decision making can be changed overnight. So recognizing the right partners and then thinking few steps ahead together is what I believe defines success stories from those that are not in great position and do not have high chances for success. Even if we think about largest companies, they're also recognizing who are the few market leaders and doubling down on those few and securing their backlog for a long time. This kind of partnerships is what enables both users to do right things well and vendors to accommodate the needs of those users. So, yeah, we are in the business where it's about products, but it's also the business of making sure this product works well, works right for a specific customer.
If it doesn't work right, you don't have a business. Let's cut to the chase here. You don't have a business if it doesn't work right. You have a very angry customer with a very large microphone that tells all their vendors in their ecosystem, don't use this product. You're right. Partnerships are key in any business. It's key on the autonomous vehicle side of the business. It's key on the autonomous trucking side of the business. It's key on the agriculture autonomy side. We can go down the line. Partnerships are one of the defining factors of autonomy, point blank. There's also different markets where autonomy is going to be deployed. So obviously you're focused on logistical warehouse market, or from a global market perspective, you mentioned Canada, you mentioned the United States, Europe. Are there certain global markets that you feel that will adopt autonomous forklifts before others?
I believe all the markets right now are in search for the right solution, are in search for optimization and efficiency gains. Besides North America, we are heavily exposed. Europe, where we originate from, there is also a huge pool from some Asian markets, right? Japanese market, something you mentioned before, is an environment where the population is getting older and older, right? Same things around labor shortages are hitting that market. Through Toyota, that also we discussed before, we hear there is significant pool customers, really operations look for that solution. So I would say those are very few gaps now globally, or pockets where people say, you know what, we don't need automation at the moment. And those are typically countries where the wage rates are still so low and there is so large gaps. There is still large space to increase those wages, to continue incentivizing people to do the work. But that gap is getting smaller and smaller. At some point, sooner or later, big part of the world will just be in huge need for automation. And then loading, unloading automation is just one element of that.
Is it fair to say follow the labor shortage and those are the right markets to deploy autonomy in warehouses?
The bottom line really is you want to sustain operations on one side and do it as cost efficiently as possible. So growing wage rates, growing labor shortage are really two strong forces. And I would say even wage rates are a result of labor shortage. So labor shortage is really the driving force behind the entire transformation in the industry.
When does competition start to heat up in the autonomous forklift space? We're starting in early rumblings, but a leaderboard hasn't emerged yet, or a pack of companies hasn't really emerged to start to gain market share. When does more competition start to enter the market? And when it does, how do you prepare Gideon for that new competition?
Competition is certainly working. We see some incumbents. We see companies like Toyota, like Kia, like Mitsubishi, Crown, Jungheinrich, who really recognize automation is our future and they need to try to pick up, right? Some of them are pretty good at that. On the other side, we have newcomers, companies like Gideon, who recognize there is really big gap in this specific application that needs to be addressed. So when I think about forklifts, I really think about specific applications and use cases. Now, we are focused today on trailer loading and unloading and recognize that one being maybe the most important one. There are a few other companies that focus, for example, on loading bay or on high bay operations, right? Reach trucks automation, things like that. So those are also exciting forklift automation businesses. There is huge opportunity for each of those. When is this going to heat up? The truth is, robotics does take time. These kind of products do not happen overnight. We believe that more and more companies will be coming this way, will be entering the market, but we are not seeing dozens of companies overnight just showing up out of nowhere. we see that it's going to take years for multiple new companies to really hit the use case.
Market's going to evolve over time, and robotics does take time. It will take time for the technology to be built and to be scaled. What did you and your founders see when you decided to enter the market early on? Because we're still very early in the autonomous forklift market.
We were excited about the opportunity and didn't know how hard it is. It was, for us, a very natural thing. We know how to solve things, how to run autonomously vehicles. It was part of our academic background. We did PhDs in autonomous driving space. Partially, we knew in industry what's missing. So we recognized, there is the opportunity, and really said, let's come from Croatia. Let's solve this big problem for the world. That's how we started. Fast forward, we needed some iterations, some time to figure out what is that use case that we have to double down on. So historically, we learned a lot about warehouse, a lot about processes and nuances between different processes, why some of them are hard, why some of them are simpler, just from that base core process perspective. And then thought about, okay, what kind of solutions, what kind of robotics vehicles and technologies we need to really address that pain point.
Wanted to solve a big problem. You're solving a big problem. What is the future of Gideon?
So Gideon is really here to optimize loading and unloading bay and then broaden that across the rest of industry. Bring autonomy closer to warehouse, bring autonomy into industrial operations where today we have incredible lack of that capability. Loading and unloading is just the first step, but really fundamental reimagination of supply chain is where we're going to end up.
Warehouses are getting automated. Warehouses are increasing efficiency. Gideon is at the forefront of increasing efficiency in warehouses. Josip, as we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners and viewers to take away with them today?
We talked a lot about robotics today, but we also talked about another very important thing. That's about people. So people are adopting automation. People are driving actually automation. And I would say robotics is by itself a long haul journey, but you should not bet on robots. You should bet on people. So that's my concluding remark. And that's what I remind myself every time I enter a facility and I think about how it's going to look like in the future. Yeah, there's going to be many robots, but people will still play a central role.
Bet on people. People play a great role in society. People also create the robots. Let's not forget that.
Oh, absolutely.
The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is Gideon. Josip, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Grayson, thanks for having me.
If you've enjoyed listening, please kindly rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Road to Autonomy, or email podcast@roadtoautonomy.com. The Road to Autonomy podcast is produced by the Road to Autonomy LLC. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect those views of the Road to Autonomy, its subsidiaries, its shareholders, directors, investors, or partners. The content discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, investment, tax, or business advice. Nothing is a recommendation that you purchase, sell, or hold any security or other investment, or that you pursue any investment style or strategy. The content of this podcast is presented on an as-is basis with no warranties, express or implied, of any kind. Financial mentions about companies in the Road to Autonomy Index and discussions about the Road to Autonomy Indexes are for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon when making any investment decision. Furthermore, an inclusion of security within the Road to Autonomy Index is not a recommendation by the Road to Autonomy Indices, LLC, to buy, sell, or hold that such security, nor is it considered to be investment advice.